Hello everyone, my name is Shane McElroy and welcome to all of you joining us on our second pre-breeding webinar this week in advance of the upcoming breeding season. On our webinar yesterday, which is available to watch again on our YouTube channel and on Tyrlon Farm Life, we heard from ICBF and Devea on sex semen use, as well as sire selection, including the use of EBI to produce replacement heifers and DBI bull figures to increase the beef value of non-replacements. So for today's webinar, we'll take a very practical approach to getting things right from a nutrition and an animal health perspective. And we'll also hear from John Ryan, future farmer in Gortnahu in Tipperary, as to the steps he's taken on the farm now to prepare for breeding in a couple of weeks' time. We'll shortly hear from Yara Summers on animal health and breeding management tips. And before that, Elaine Brady, our ruminant nutritionist, will take us through the important points to ensure that cows are ready to go and calf from a nutritional perspective. So for today's interactive session, you'll be able to put your questions to our speakers by email to questions@tyrlonfarmlife.com. We'll have those up on screen, or text message to 086 180 3947. And if you're happy to, you also can include your name and county, just gives us an idea of where you're coming from. So just in terms of an overview of what we cover off today, we have the nutritional factors influencing fertility. We have, and Elaine Brady will take us through that. Then we will have Joris present pre-breeding animal health and what to be thinking about from that perspective. And we'll also then have breeding strategy decisions around management of breeding, if you like. And then John Ryan will give us the farmer's perspective on pre-breeding prep that he's taken on his farm to get the herd ready for breeding. So the webinar today will be recorded and will be available afterwards via Tyrlon Farm Life and on our YouTube channel. So just as a reminder, we'd like you to become part of the conversation and send in your questions by email to questions@tyrlonfarmlife.com or text message to 086 180 3947. So we'll now hand over to Elaine, our first speaker, who will discuss the nutritional side of management of breeding over the next couple of weeks. So over to you, Elaine. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Shane, and good afternoon, everyone. So as Shane mentioned, I'll be talking about nutritional factors influencing fertility, so the importance of energy, protein, and briefly touching on fiber and kind of what's happening on farm at the moment and the impacts of energy deficits that it can have on fertility, and then just briefly on heifer management around breeding as well. So the different nutritional factors that can impact fertility are energy, protein, fiber, and also minerals. And I'll predominantly be focusing on energy because this is the most common nutritional cause of poor fertility. And this is because her intake lags behind her milk production. So cows peak around 6 to 8 weeks after calving, and her intake only starts peaking between 9 and 12 weeks after calving. So she only consumes around 11 to 13 kgs of dry matter after she calves, and this gradually increases by up to 1 kg of dry matter per week until 12 weeks after calving, if everything runs smoothly. And this usually happens around the largest energy deficit, usually occurs around peak milk production. And this also coincides when we're going into second rotation, where there might be a grass deficit. There's not enough grass going into the diet to meet her energy requirements because of maybe the average farm cover was ran too low in the first rotation, or regrowths are just lagging behind, whether that's because of weather or cool conditions. So this is why we say a cow should be on a continuous rising plane of nutrition from calving until breeding, so making sure that negative energy balance doesn't prolong or is excessive, and she's not losing too much body addition score, so no more than half a body addition score from calving until breeding. So briefly touching on protein then, it's usually too much protein that's an issue rather than too little in a grass-based system, because grass tends to be high in crude protein in excess of what she needs. So It takes a lot of energy from the cow to process that excess protein or nitrogen in the diet and get rid of it. So if she's already being underfed, this will contribute to her body score loss. Then in terms of urea, it can contribute to poor fertility if it's too high or fluctuates around AI. Then in terms of fiber, it's also important for rumen health to ensure those dry matters are maximized. So if there's enough fiber in the diet, that will help rumen health. And also grass tends to be very lush and low in fiber in the second rotation, or when grass grows very quickly in May when we're in the breeding season. So fiber kind of slows that down, ensures she can utilize the nutrients in that grass. And also minerals do play a very important role in fertility, particularly in trace elements, and these include copper, selenium and iodine are the most, and they tend to be lacking in grass, so it's important that those are supplemented to meet her requirements. You can flick on, please. So currently, cows were either had to be rehoused, or those that were lucky enough could continue to graze using on-off grazing. So that meant there was a lot of silage in the majority of diets over the last few weeks, and this meant that energy intake was reduced, and that's because silage has a lower intake potential and lower energy value compared to that of grass. So average quality silage only has an intake potential of 11 to 12 kgs of dry matter. So if cows are not supplemented to fill that dry matter and energy deficit, they start losing body condition score. And we've seen this in drops in milk yields and protein percentages dropping also on farm. And that is because of the lack of energy in the diet. So you can see here cows with different volumes of grass or silage in front of them, and the difference that dry matter can have. So over the recent wet days or in the breeding season, there might be very wet days that might occur, the impact it has on dry matter intakes. And that is because a cow has to take in a lot more volume to meet her dry matter intake potential, but she just doesn't have the capacity for that. So during those times, it's important that you come in time with either a buffer feed or a concentrate supplementation when there is wet weather forecasted to maintain that dry matter intake and energy. Flick on. So this is just a table to outline how much cows should be getting in terms of concentrates, whether they're in by night or out by day or stretching grass because they're in short supply. So on average, the average cow should be consuming between 6 and 8 kgs of concentrates to meet both her maintenance and milk yield requirements. However, that doesn't include if you need to be building body condition score. If that's the case, then you need to add an extra kilo or a kilo and a half to build that body condition score over the next month. You can move on, please. So what are the impacts of the lack of energy or dry matter intake in the diet? Means that she'll be losing body condition score at a time where she should be either gaining or maintaining that body condition score. And this will delay return to estrus, so you won't see strong heats. Cows should be showing signs of heats 42 days after calving. It also will reduce conception rates because the hormones are not produced needed for fertility aren't being produced, and this will then extend the calving intervals. And the figure that is always quoted is this will cost €250 per cow for each missed heat, and this is due to extended calving intervals and the loss of production next lactation. So here's a graph that shows the effect on body condition score loss and the 3-week submission rate. So cows that lose little body condition have a higher chance of being submitted within the first 3 weeks. However, if they lose more than half body condition score, they have less than 50% chance of being submitted within the first 3 weeks. And different indicators that can be used to assess the negative energy balance or how severe it is looking at your milk, fats and proteins. So if the milk fat to protein ratio is more than 1.4, this is an indicator that she's milking off her back to meet that energy requirement for milk production. A common one is then protein percentage, which we're seeing at the moment. So if a cow is dropping below 3% protein, there's an indicator of lack of energy. So not to forget about the heifers, it's also important to keep an eye on those to make sure they're hitting their target weights. It's particularly around breeding, so that they're at 60% of their mature body weight. So this just doesn't happen overnight. So you need to be making sure they hit those targets all along. So the heifer rearing program that we have kind of sets out great guidelines on how to achieve those targets. So if heifers are behind, you need to prioritize those now leading up to breeding season. So if grass is scarce, maybe just let out those that are behind to give them a chance and leave those ones on target in the shed. Or if they're all outside, maybe separate them from the group and give them an extra kilo or two to push them on. So heifers do have the potential to gain up to a kg of body weight per day when they're on high quality grass in spring. So in summary, it's important to fill any gaps in terms of dry matter or energy. So it's important knowing your quality of your forage that you're feeding, the milk yields, the energy requirement, and then filling that gap then in terms of either high quality forage or supplements. So it's a short-term investment which results in better milk production, body score, and also fertility performance then later on, and also prioritizing those heifers that are behind on target. So thank you very much for listening.
Thanks very much, Elaine. That's top class. Excellent. There's a good bit in it. In fairness, we need to make sure the cows are getting their daily intakes as they need, be it grass or be it concentrates and silage. So look, things have been fairly challenged over the last number of weeks with weather, so it's been not so simple. But we need to make sure that the cows get the maximum intakes that they can hold condition and first of all comboing and then go on calf. So excellent. No doubt there'll be plenty of questions on that later on. So look, we'll move straight on to Joris, who's going to take us through some pieces on animal health and also on breeding strategies. So Joris, I'll hand over to yourself. Thanks.
Thanks, Shane. And yeah, we'll briefly touch on a few of the key animal health points and then have a bit of information on breeding strategies for each herd, obviously. And so we'll go through the first bit is actually your overall herd health status. And then more specifically, is there anything pre-breeding related veterinary checks that you can do to worry about or take away the worry of fertility health issues? We'll also look at some of the fertility targets that might apply to each of the herds, and then we'll look at some of the breeding options and breeding decisions that need to be made. So overall, I suppose in the pre-breeding preparation, what we're really looking at from an animal health perspective is how ready are the cow and heifer that you hope to be breeding, and how ready are you to breed those animals. So this starts with cow selection. Have you identified which cows you actually want to breed from, and what do you want to breed from those cows? Are those cows selected to be breeding replacements, or is it a different type of calf you want out of those cows? Is it cows that have health issues that you had encountered in the past and you actually thought, well, actually, maybe I don't want to breed from those cows? Well, make that decision now before they go in calf again. What semen do you want to use? And we'll touch back on that in the next couple of slides. Pre-breeding vaccinations, very important to have those in place. Obviously, your sire selection, and that includes your stock bull. There's the general pre-breeding animal health that we'll touch on the next slide as well. There's synchronization of heifers that comes into the strategies, obviously, and any sort of fertility checks that need to be done. But you see the biggest circle in the middle there is the pre-breeding heat detection, because that in itself sort of covers a lot of the issues that might be encountered in the pre-breeding period. And by spending a bit of time on the pre-breeding heat detection, it's actually easier to hone in on the cows that have issues, and rest assured that the ones that don't have an issue are ready to go. Next slide, please, Shane. So if we just focus on the animal health for a minute, the first point I would say is actually look at your overall herd disease control at the moment. So is the vaccination status of the herd up to date, and what was your parasite control like? So on the right hand side there, actually you can see it's a printout from one of our bulk tank herd disease screening reports, and this is last year's, but in the next week or so everybody should be receiving their March results. And if you then look at what March is like compared to the November or December reading, you will actually see that how was my parasite control over the winter. And I realize this is obviously for the milking cows, but it does give you an indication of what parasite pressure your heifers, for example, could be under as well if they were exposed to the same parasites. And parasites can have a huge impact on your heifer development, for example. So heifers not reaching the weight targets that you want them to have when they're 13, 14, 15 months old, it could actually be due to an excessive parasite burden, and you still have a chance there maybe to do an intervention and try and get them to catch up. But from a vaccination point of view, there's the important vaccines from a fertility point of view, obviously your lepto, your BVD, but also your IBR, don't forget about that. Those are all relevant this time of the year, but what I would say is avoid having vaccinations going into cows in the week before the breeding season is due to start, so your MSD, your mating start date, or during at least the first round of AI. And that is not necessarily because the vaccine itself causes issues. It's more the stress on the animal of being vaccinated, of being brought into the crush, the handling, and sometimes some of the vaccines, when they boost the immune system, they could give a little spike in temperature. Some of us may have experienced that over the last couple of years when we went for our booster shots, that you didn't feel overly great the day after your vaccine. Well, that could happen in cattle as well, and that could just put them off showing signs of heat, and that's a missed opportunity at a very important critical time of the breeding season. So if you can avoid doing any of that in those, the start of mating and the first 3 weeks of breeding, that is quite important. If you go back to maybe the start of calving and think about, well, what happened at calving? Because your pre-breeding prep, as much as we would like to ignore it at the time in the calving season, the pre-breeding prep really starts at calving. And so you really need to think back, well, which cows had an issue at calving? Which ones had a difficult calving? Did I have milk fever in the herd? Did I have cows that held their cleanings that had retained placentas? Did I have sections, LDAs in cows, and so on? Those are specific cows that you actually want to put on a list that you want the vet to check out to make sure that everything is okay with them from a fertility perspective. Specifically, are they cycling? Are the ovaries working? And if not, if you do that this time of year, so we're at the end of March now, most herds have at least 2 weeks, if not 3 or 4 weeks before they start breeding. There is a chance still that the treatment that the vet will give these cows will set them right, and actually they will come bulling in the first couple of weeks of the breeding season and should have decent fertility. The same applies to cows that haven't been seen bulling yet. So going back to what I said at the previous slide was the pre-breeding heat detection. You really want to know that before the breeding starts that the cows are all cycling. Have they all resumed their normal reproductive cycle? And any means of heat detection, whether it's scratch cards, tail pains, sitting in the car watching the cows through binoculars, or using collars, it doesn't really matter as long as you spend a little bit of time on looking at the 3-4 weeks before the breeding season starts, who is bulling and who isn't. The ones that are perfect, you can leave them alone. You actually could take a note of the date and you kind of know 3 weeks later, I should be expecting that cow again. The ones that aren't bulling, they should go onto the list as well, and the vet would like to see them because there could be something going on. And then the third point on animal health, and Elaine already touched on this as well on the nutrition side, it's that loss of body condition score, body condition in the pre-breeding. So any loss of body condition actually has an impact on the fertility, and that has to do with the fat being broken down, the fat reserves of the cow being broken down, creating metabolites that are not very healthy for the egg that you're hoping to get fertilized at the start of the breeding season. So even weeks before the breeding season starts, body condition loss can have an impact on the quality of the egg that you're hoping to fertilize. So any cows that are in low body condition, or your late calvers, for example, because they have even less time, consider putting them on a once a day milking for a little while, just to allow them to catch up, allow them to build up a bit of body condition, or at least not lose any more, and that would help them get a better fertility. And obviously, while the breeding season is coming at us, but in the weeks beforehand, maintain that energy in the diet, as Elaine pointed out, and make sure that the mineral supply is there. Okay, next slide. Thank you. So from a breeding strategies point of view, you really should look back at how did breeding go last breeding season, and in most herds that is last year, last spring. So on your ICBF, everybody actually will be able to see a fertility report. The report is only as good as the information that went into it. Okay, so if every serve is recorded, it will be more accurate than if all you have is a pregnancy recorded, for example, right? So keep that in mind, that the information that goes in determines how accurate the report is. But you can see the KPIs that ICBF uses are the ones that are always talked about. It's your 21-day submission rate. They also have a 42-day submission rate. It's your conception rate of the first serve. It's your 6-week pregnancy rate, and it's your overall pregnancy rate, or how most people look at it is actually the opposite, is the empty rate. And I've listed a few of the targets there that I suppose we all use and are familiar with. Your submission rate in the first 3 weeks should be 90% or above. The conception rate of the first serve should be 60% or higher. Your 6-week in-calf rate should be 70, if not 75%, if you want a compact calving. And your overall pregnancy rate, you're really looking at a 90%, so less than 10% of an empty rate. But that's all well and good, having those KPIs and those targets, but you really need to think, well, what are the goals for my herd? Because if you're currently running at an 80% submission rate, maybe 90 should be the goal. But if you're already at a 90, can you increase that? Can you change something? Maybe your submission rate is great, but your conception rate is actually poor. So have a look at what your results are, where the downfalls potentially are, or where improvements can be made. But maybe you don't like a compact calving. Maybe you felt that last year you were too compact and it was too busy in the calving season for some reason. And that's something that you need to keep in mind as well. So have a think about what suits your herd and what you should be aiming for. The next step is really looking at, in the same report, you can look at how was my heat detection in the previous breeding season. How accurate was I? And then think back, well, what did I use? Did I use scratch cards? Did I use tail paint? Did I use different colors of tail paint? Or did I stick with the one color and actually that was quite confusing? Or have I introduced collars, for example, or tags that will do the technology piece and do the heat detection for you? And what you're really looking for in that report is any repeat heats. You want them to come in around the normal 21-day cycle, so between the 18 and the 24 days. And the figure you're looking for there is actually that you want at least 65% of repeat heats to be in that window. And any heats outside of that window could be missed heats, or it could also be complete heat inaccuracy. And that could be because the cow was showing some signs of heat. Maybe she was only playing along, but she wasn't really bulling. You didn't want to take a chance. You AI'd her, and a couple of days later, she was properly standing heat. And so you went in again. And that's a short heat or a short repeat interval. And that shows up in that table. Obviously, if you use any sort of synchronization, you're going to change that. And you're going to influence those intervals as well. So keep that in mind. What did you use last year? And is that an explanation for why maybe in this table, 50% of the heifers had a short repeat? Well, that's because maybe there was something used there that might have explained it. The third part is the semen selection. So we spent a whole webinar talking about that yesterday, so I won't spend much time on it now. Go and watch that recording and look back and make a decision then. Which way do you want to go? Are you using all AI? Are you still using a stock bull? Are you sticking with the conventional semen or hoping to use some sexed? are you breeding dairy replacements or are you breeding dairy to beef calves? Those are important decisions. When it comes to the stock bull, I will say, because we probably didn't touch on it much yesterday, but the performance of the stock bull in a previous breeding season is no guarantee that he will still do the same job this year. So if you get a chance, it might be worth getting the bull fertility tested. It's a relatively quick job that your vet could do, and you'll get a good idea of what it's like, so that you have no surprises in the middle of the breeding season when you're hoping to get the bull to mop up and he's actually no good. Also, the health of the bull is important. Make sure he's also vaccinated for the same things that the cows are being vaccinated for, and make sure his feet are in good order so that lameness isn't going to prevent him from doing his job. You hang on to a stock bull for many months. He only has to work for a couple of weeks, but you want him to be in top condition for those couple of weeks. And then the last point is synchronization. Synchronization is a great way to have either a compact calving or at least have a compact calving for a cohort of the herd, for example, your heifers. And if you want to keep them maybe as a group of animals calving earlier than the cows or something like that, that you actually could do them. So the simple program that a lot of people may be familiar with is a shot of PG 6 days into the breeding season for the heifers, and for the heifers that haven't been bred yet. So you breed for 6 days. Anything that hasn't been AI'd gets a shot of PGE, and then 11 days later on day 17, you do the same again for heifers that still haven't been served. And in the next couple of days, they will come bulling. You serve the animals on a standing heat, and so within the first 3 weeks of the breeding season, technically you should have every heifer served, and you should get conception rates of 70% and above. There is more complicated, more comprehensive fixed time AI protocols that you can use as well. But those are very herd specific, require a lot of attention to detail. We spoke about them yesterday, and I would say it's very specific to what your vet is used to. Your vet will have a protocol that he has experience with that works for him, and I would go by that. So that's it for me, Shane.
But also breeding management, and sure, likewise with Elaine's, there's going to be lots of questions, and we have a good number of questions coming in already. I would just remind you guys of the number. It's 086 180 3947 to throw out your questions to our speakers on nutrition, breeding management, animal health. And now we're going to bring in John Ryan, who's our future farmer, our monitor farm program in conjunction with Teagasc. John is farming over in Gortonhu in Tipperary, and look, went out on your farm walk there last year, John, and running a very good operation there, in fairness. So look, I'm going to hand over to yourself, John, and Joris and Elaine to go through just a few details of what's happening on the farm at the minute, and the actions that you're taking to manage the breeding season around sex semen and bull selection, and also getting the cows ready for it, and pre-breeding heat detection, all the bits and pieces. But hand over to yourself and Joris there.
Thank you very much, Shane, and welcome into the webinar, John. So as a brief introduction, maybe John, maybe give the people on the call a brief overview of how, where, and the type of farming that you're doing.
Yeah, I'm farming here in Gortonhu with my wife and my parents, and we're milking 140 cows, and we're spring calving system.
Yeah, and you're nearly done calving. You have a handful of cows still to calve, is it, John? And then that's it.
Yeah, 7 cows left to calve now, so.
the end is in sight. Yeah, very good, very good. And now we're talking about calving now, actually, John, and you know, it might all be a distant memory at this stage, but how did calving go, and was there any issues in the calving season that you had to correct while things were ongoing?
Actually, for the most part, it was good, like, you know, went fairly well. Like, you know, at the start, though, we had a little bit of problem with milk fever. I had maybe 7 or 8 maybe milk fevers in the first 60 cows that calved, and we went with magnesium flakes and that kind of seemed to have solved the problem. We put magnesium flakes on the silage in front of them, and we had no cases since, so seems to have solved the problem.
Oh, very good, very good. So yeah, those I suppose, going back to what I said in the earlier slides, those would be cows that I'd be interested in having a look at. Maybe, you know, have a look at are they bulling at this stage, because they would have been the first bunch calved, so that they've had plenty of time to recover. So it'd be interesting to see that. But if we think back for your herd, John, for last year's breeding season, how do you feel it went? If you have figures that you can quote, conception rates, admission rate, empty rates, and so on, that'd be brilliant. But how do you feel the breeding season went last year, and is there something that you feel you should improve on for this year?
It went okay, I suppose. Like, you know, it was nothing spectacular. Was there was about 47 or 8% of the cows held in the first service, like, you know, which would be average enough, like, you know. I'd be hoping for a bit more, like, you know. And but the heifers, 52% of the heifers held to sex semen, which would be down from maybe averaging 60% over the previous few years with conventional semen.
Yeah.
So
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. So so I'm kind of going to change slight plan with the heifers this year.
Okay.
What I went with was double PG last year with day 0 and day 11. So I'm going to try a fixed time program on them this year and see can I improve with sex semen.
Very good. And those heifers, are they on the home farm? Are they on an out farm? Why the synchronization?
They're on an out farm.
Yeah, very good. So it suits you to have that done, obviously, more structured, and you have the facilities on the out farm to look after all the heifers on the specific days.
Yeah, exactly. There's a crush up there, so to be able to be no problem that way.
Very good. And will all the heifers get sexed semen then on the fixed time AI? Is that it?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, there'll be 30 of them there, and they'll all get sex semen on the on the fixed time.
And will the cows get sex semen as well?
They will get sex semen. Yeah. I picked out 6 sex semen bulls, and I have 2 conventional bulls as well.
Okay, very good. And on the cows, you're using the collars for heat detection, is it, nowadays?
Yeah, collars for heat detection, and they're very handy for the pre-breeding as well. And I'm job for the weekend now. I'm going to go through the list and see what has been bulling and what hasn't been bulling, and I'll get my vet to check them out. We'll say when next week or the week after.
Very good. So when is the breeding start? Yeah, when is the breeding start for the cows, John?
Cows 17th of April.
17th of April. Very good. And if we look at, you know, that's about almost 3 weeks away, I suppose. There's a little bit of time the cows can be treated, but is there any other vaccines and so on that you tend to use in the herd and that need to be done, or has everything been done? Are you well prepared?
Not that well. I have the vaccines not administered yet. The heifers have got all their boosters. They've got all their vaccines for their left-on BVD, but the cows have to get their booster now early next week.
Oh, very good.
They got an IBR shot there in January as well, so they're covered for that. We'll say for the breeding season as well.
Very good. And is there any other, I suppose, animal health issues that you're concerned with, or is there any? I know lameness isn't a big problem in your herd, for example, and you have nice roadway, so I don't think that's going to cause you too much concerns. But is there anything else in the lead up to the breeding season that you do focus on very much so from an animal health perspective?
Well, so just I give him a bolus, a mineral bolus before breeding as well, to help make sure that all their minerals everything is up to date, that they have everything that they need that way, like, you know. And to be all make sure they're all, when I'm doing body condition score them, and make sure that they're up to scratch, like, you know, nothing that's underweight or under body condition scored will get they'll be put on once a day.
Very good. That actually leads us on to Elaine very well into the nutrition piece. So I'll hand you over to her, and she can take it from there.
Thanks, yours. Yeah, just while we're on the mineral topic there, just out of curiosity, have you ever had any fertility problems in relation to lack of minerals in previous years, or has everything always run smoothly?
No, I did. I there a couple of years ago, I would say I didn't bother with the mineral with the bolus. I thought it was okay, but I finished up with 15% of the herd empty, or over 15% of the herd empty, like, you know. So I went back to bolus in there last year and got that down to 10%.
Yeah, yeah. So you were deficient in iodine or selenium or copper?
I'd say just copper, selenium, and iodine, I think, were the main ones I was deficient in. Yeah.
Yeah. So like that's most likely like that's a very common cause of infertility. I know I only touched on it briefly there, but grass is very low in that. So particularly, and copper in areas of high molybdenum and iron, that's also important to keep in mind when you're looking at minerals in terms of fertility. Just to talk through, I suppose, how you've managed your cows since calving, and I suppose the starting point is to calve down cows in good body condition score. So if you don't mind just talking through how you've managed your cows in terms of feeding and maintaining that body condition score since calving.
Yeah, sure. They started calving there around the 10th of January, and they were on silage there full time with 5.5 kilos a meal until the end of the month, and then the first days of February, then they were out to grass, and they were in at night with silage and out during the day, and we were kind of spoiled for a couple of weeks there, we'll say, with the weather. It was great, and March kind of turned a bit more mixy, so there was a few wet days and they were in, and so the kind of production slipped and protein slipped a little bit as well, like, you know, but they were kept them on the 5.5 kilos a meal, and I'm started zero grazing now this week as well. So they're on grass full time. They're on grass grazing during the day now, and they're on zero grass at night.
Very good. And you've maintained the concentrate level at 5 kgs then, even though they're full time at grass?
I will probably cut it back now this week, like, you know. We'll say, so to see how they were getting on. I didn't want to reduce it, we'll say, in the changeover. So yeah. I'll see how they're getting on. If the clean outs aren't wonderful, I'll cut back the meal a kilo or two.
Yeah. Very good. Just then, I suppose, touching on heifer management and stuff. So just maybe are your heifers on target in terms of live weights, and if any are behind, what will you do with them?
Yeah, no, all the heifers seem to be on target. They'll be going out now tomorrow or the day after, probably Saturday they'll go out, and if I get a chance I'll weigh them on the way out, but they look on target, we'll say. I was selling bullocks the same age as them, like, you know, and they're all around the 360, 370 kilos. So my heifers should be roughly the same size, same weight. So they're all good on target, and they'll have a couple of weeks grass in them before I start breeding. So
that's very good. That's great to hear that they're all on target. Hopefully the breeding season will go well with them. Yeah, that's kind of most of my questions in terms of nutrition. If anybody else have any questions?
Just John, is there anything else that is worth mentioning you're finding on your farm at the minute, or anything else that we haven't covered?
I don't think so. No, I think everything is kind of
direction. No, that's 100%. Look, we've a good few questions in, so we'll maybe go to some of those questions. There's a good few in for yourself, Elaine, so far. Couple on milk urea, so maybe go to those first. So Tom in Wicklow is asking, what should milk ureas be? My recent results are 30 to 40. Is that okay, Elaine, do you think? And sorry, maybe I'll throw in the second question while we're at it as well. Can milk ureas be too low and impact fertility? So
yeah. Thanks, Shane. So milky years, so you kind of want to be between kind of around 20 to 35 maximum. I wouldn't be too concerned going up to 40. But anything, see, it's more see the results in terms of fertility due to high milk urea is very inconsistent, and not every farm that suffers from high milk urea has poor conception rates, but it can impact the uterine environment, so reducing your uterine pH if it is too high. But it's usually the fluctuations of those milk ureas around AI and the early days of conception that where it can cause a problem. So anything above 40 would be a concern, but more so the fluctuation around AI is probably in terms of too low milk ureas, that wouldn't be much of concern in a grazing scenario, because it's usually being too high that's the issue. But maybe in a drought scenario, and when it goes really low, I know in 2018 that might have impacted a few conception rates, because you still need the amino acids to build that embryo as well. So, but that would be severely low, anything below maybe 12 milligrams per deciliter that would cause that.
Yeah, no, very good, very good. Yaris question there: with heifers on an out farm, would an Angus stock bull achieve better conception rates than a synchronization program? So I presume that means versus a synchronization program with AI. So will a bull do a better job?
That depends on the bull, I would say. Bulls tend to be very good at submission rate, but the conception rate varies quite drastically between bulls. I think if you're doing a synchronization protocol, conception rates in heifers will be very good. I don't think the average Angus bull will do better, but there is huge variation within the bulls. But when you're doing a synchronization, and I'm talking here now of a fixed time AI, you'll get 100% submission rate, obviously, but you need to stick to the times as prescribed in the program. And depending on the type of semen that you're using, whether it's conventional or sexed, you may have to use a different time of AI in relation to your last shot of GnRH. So it is important that you're accurate with your synchronization, and when you're doing that, your conception rates should be good enough.
Good, very good. And is there, that's a question with tail painting, is there any tail paint colors you would advise that are better than others? So I suppose it depends on the color of the cow, maybe as much.
Yeah, that's my first thought, is it depends on the color of the cow. Go for bright colors, right? So some paints are available in really high vis yellows and whatnot. That works, but bright blues, bright greens, bright reds tend to work quite well. If you have white cows, obviously try and stay away from the lighter colors, and definitely not white paint. And if you have red cows, don't use the orangey sort of paint. That's what I would say. But other than that, yeah, whatever is the brightest to spot. Yeah.
Contrasting color is the summary. But I think it is important to stick with the same color throughout. And John, just in terms of you're not tail painting, so you don't need to think about that. But you were tail painting previously, John, were you?
Yeah, I was tail painting there, was up to 3 years ago, was until I got the colours.
Yeah. I suppose the key thing with that is to get in early and have the cows painted. I know you're going breeding now in 2.5 weeks' time. Generally, you would have tail painted before now, so that you can see what's going on early in the season, isn't it?
Yeah, I would have started, we'll say, maybe 3 weeks before breeding. I probably would have started maybe last week, maybe, I suppose, or 3 weeks out. And
so with the colours, it's always on, isn't it?
Yeah, well, sure. It's a job list to do, and it's very easy seeing, because, and I used to, anything that to paint it rub off, I used to paint them with a different colour. So I used to have 4 or 5 different colours, and
right, and just
by the time you finished.
change around, exactly. John, a question in from Jim, doesn't say where he's from, but were you happy with the sexed semen that you've used, and will you use more in the future? And maybe to add to that question, you mentioned you had picked 6 sexed bulls and then 2 conventional. What proportion sexed have you used?
I just used I used 36 straws last year, and I suppose I was happy from the point of view that it was maybe somewhere between 5 and 10% less conception rate than conventional semen, which seems to be the norm. From that point of view, I was kind of happy, like, you know. But what I did this year was, when I was picking the bulls, I used both sex and conventional. Picked both sex and conventional because it gave me a better choice of bulls, and I was able to pick better quality bulls. If I picked all 6 bulls, the quality wouldn't, it would narrow down the quality on the bulls. The fat and the protein wouldn't have been as high, like, you know. So that's basically why I went with both conventional and sexed.
Yeah, not a bother. Elaine, one for you from Martin O'Reilly in Leash. Martin was messaging in yesterday as well, so thanks for your questions, Martin. Is bale or wagon silage better than pit silage in terms of milk protein and also providing more fibre to the cows? And if feeding pit silage, what can be done to get over a wet spring when getting out to grass is tough?
Well, it all depends, I suppose, on the quality of the bales. So if you've made those bales yourselves and you know what quality they are, bales tend to be of higher quality and provide more long fibre than your pit silage. So they would help maintain or kind of boost that milk protein compared to maybe pit silage. However, if you're sourcing bales from other farms, if you're low in silage stocks, those tend to be of poor quality. So I'd stick with the pit silage because I'd know what quality it is. Then in terms of when it comes to wet spring, I suppose you can complement your pit silage with other forages such as maize silage can increase your dry matter intake and energy level of the diet. Maybe if beet is available, incorporating that. But I suppose the simplest way of increasing dry matter intakes and energy intakes is by upping your supplementation of concentrates. So typically between 6 to 8 kgs, depending on your milk production of the cow.
Yeah, no, 100%. And a question in from Pat in Waterford: not getting too much grass and silage is limited. What's the maximum concentrate level I can feed?
So the maximum amount of concentrates you can kind of feed in a parlour would be 8 kg, 6 to 8 kgs, depending on your system. So then once you're supplementing more than 8 kgs, I'd do a midday buffer feed, kind of either along the feeding barrier. And if you have a diet feeder available, you can always mix it in with silage and a bit of straw, just to keep the rumen right. But if you don't have a feeder available, just maybe a bale of straw as well, or hay, just to keep the rumen right.
In that 6 or 8 kilos a day max, that's obviously per day rather than per feed, isn't it? So
yeah.
3 and 4, yeah.
So that'd be 4 kgs each feed.
Okay.
Twice a day.
Yeah, 100%. Yours 2 questions in from James on diseases. So I'm positive for Neospora in the milk test. How can it prevent abortions? And then he asks about, is vaccinating for BVD still necessary?
Okay. Preventing Neospora abortions is a tricky one. If the herd is positive, what you want to avoid basically is keeping Neospora in the herd. In our seasonal system, animals that abort usually leave the system, and so they don't hang around very long. But not every cow that has Neospora will abort, and they might pass it on to their calf. And if that's a replacement heifer, she's born with already being Neospora positive. So that's how it stays in the herd. So really what you want to do before the breeding season starts is finding out which cows in your herd currently are positive for Neospora and which replacement heifers. But you could do it technically through a milk sample. So if you're milk recording, I think Progressive Genetics are the milk recording company. They do it. They can test individual cow samples for Neospora. Alternatively, you take a blood sample, or the vet takes a blood sample and sends it off, and that will give you an individual cow result. And then you can decide if it's 1 or 2 cows, maybe the best strategy is to get rid of those cows or just not breed them this season and let them naturally leave the herd at the end of the season. But if you have a higher proportion of cows in the herd that are positive, you really should consider that you identify those cows and heifers very clearly. I always say put a red ear tag in their left ear, and that's just a sign that they are Neospora positive, and they will be for life, and that those animals are then bred to a beef straw. It's not going to prevent abortions, but at least if they don't abort and they have a healthy calf that's born in 9 months' time, that calf is not going to stay in the herd as a replacement animal. So over time, those positive cows will actually leave the herd, but there's no way of actually preventing Neospora abortions. On the BVD, yeah, I get asked that a lot actually. Is it still necessary to do BVD vaccination? Well, first of all, if the department has told you you have to vaccinate for 2 years as part of the program. But if you're currently vaccinating for BVD and you've never had a PI calf or not in the last 5 years, whatever, look, it's something you could consider, but I would really look at the biosecurity of your herd. Neighboring farms, have you had any notification that maybe one of your neighboring farms had a positive calf in the last 2-3 years? Take all that into consideration. Now is the time of year to really do your BVD vaccine if you are on a, if you're using that in the herd, because it is about protecting the animals when they're being bred. Once they're calved, it's actually, look, BVD can come in, but it's not going to create PI calves. It's only once the cows are bred. So what you really want, if you are doing a BVD vaccine, get it into them now so that they're covered for the breeding season.
Very good, Doris. And one question, and it's sort of the last question at the minute anyway. There's questions coming in there just in the last couple of minutes, but how soon after calving should cows be seen bulling, and how early can I breed them after calving? That's from Tony.
Okay, Tony. So I suppose with the earlier calving cows, you really want to have them seen bulling by, let's say, 42 days in milk, roughly, right? If you're using collars, you might see that in those 42 days, the cows are already showing blips in the graphs, and maybe they have shown bulling. A little bit irregular, but by 42 days, every cow should have had at least one clear heat. And that means that she's rebooted basically after calving and she's ready to go. For the later calving cows and running a bit short on time, look, at the end of the day, if an animal is showing a very clear sign of heat and she has had no reproductive issues, no difficult calving and so on, they can go and calve fairly quickly after calving, and you sometimes see that in first lactation animals. But again, sort of that 42 days is a little bit of magic number, because it allows the cow to completely recover from the calving event and let her uterus, her womb, completely reset and be ready for the next embryo, basically, is what that is. And that's something you need to take into account. So a cow that has had an issue, she will just take longer. And keep in mind that late calving cows are late calving cows for a reason. They probably had an issue in a previous lactation.
Yeah, indeed. And maybe, John, just the last word to yourself, just in terms of your plans for the next couple of weeks and leading up to breeding, and then at the start of breeding itself, maybe just any pointers for the rest of the farmers out there in terms of things that not to get wrong, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I suppose the big one is to make sure that your cows are all cycling. And if you don't have any heat detection, we'll say tail paint all the cows and record them, and just make sure they're all cycling. That's the big one. And make sure they have a good plan of nutrition, we'll say, and the cows are in good body condition score. They'll be the main ones.
And you can track that as well
and get vaccines up to date as soon as possible.
Yeah, that's it. It's the last sort of window there now to try and get the vaccine sorted, and tracking that nutrition then is as simple as, how much of the cows produce and what are they producing, and what are they doing in body condition. But there's a simple enough calculation can be done there on fat and milk, fat in the milk and protein in the milk and milk solids production per day, and talk to people and there's plenty of advice available from advisors all over the country in terms of getting a bit of a steer in terms of the nutritional piece in as well. So John, thanks very much for that, and to Joris and to Elaine. Look, I'd like to thank everyone for joining the webinar today and for your participation in your questions. Really good engagement and lots of really good information going forward there. As you know, every farm is different, and look, everyone needs different solutions for different problems that they have. So look, get in touch with your local tier 1 advisor or other advisors, but make sure to take advice to work through any solutions that are needed for your own farm. Hope everyone has got some good management tips from the webinar, and that you can apply those in the farm in the coming weeks to get the best results from the upcoming breeding season. So just to close out our webinar today, thanks to everyone for joining and participating, and to our speakers, Elaine, Joris and John Ryan, our future farmer, for sharing his farm information, and also to John, Tomas and Ella, who've been working in the background to deliver the webinar as well. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you for the next one very soon, and safe farming.